Well, welcome back. We are making progress. You've been good troopers, doing your homework, staying awake. And we are now to really what I feel is kind of the apex of Webster's syllabus, and that is the formal essay and the essay models. If you recall, on page 7, where we see our track working through, we are now here. If you're on the 1-a-month schedule, it's about April. And this is where the skills we've been developing, I think, really start to come together. On this side, we've been learning how to collect up, organize, and present facts. And over here, we've been learning how to ask questions and think about things. And it's in the essay where those combine, because we're going to present facts and tell what we think about them. And that is what will differentiate an essay from a report, really. And I have a wonderful little chart to show you on developing the essayist. So let's look at this in 2 parts. First part would be, what are the models? How would that work? And then the second part is, what's the purpose and goal of doing it at all? And then we'll look at some possible advanced applications of these essay models. Now, if you turn to page 125, you will see the icon of the basic essay model. And this, in honor of the Canadians from whom we learned it, is called the Champlain model. Because Champlain, evidently an important guy, there's a whole lake named after him. So, you'll also notice that it is pretty much the same as the Unit 7. We have the introduction, 3 topics, the conclusion. And one big difference, of course, is if we're writing about cotton balls, we just think up stuff that we know about cotton balls. But if we want to write about Champlain, we maybe don't know anything or enough to write much, and we certainly wouldn't want to misrepresent facts by making them up, unless we were doing so intentionally in a satire, Dave Barry way that I mentioned. So here, you're going to have to do the research. You're going to have to read enough about Champlain to find out some possible topics. What was he? Well, evidently, he was an explorer, and he was a settler, and he was a soldier. And so you can look at those 3 aspects of his life, and you can create a paragraph about each of those using either the Unit 4 or the Unit 6 methodology. Reading, looking for interesting, important, and relevant facts. If you have multiple sources, fusing those facts. And so really we see quite clearly that these body paragraphs of the essay are really the target of what Units 4 and 6 are all about. And that way we add on to what we've researched an introduction, a conclusion. Now we did this already in the Unit 7, and everything's pretty much the same. Introduction, attention-getting device, background information, context, state the topics, settler, soldier, explorer, whatever. Conclusion, pretty much the same. Restate the topics, and then take one thing and tell what is most important and why is it important. Amplify one thing. And again, I would reiterate, please try to convince your students or somehow trick them into writing essays from the inside out. Body paragraphs first, conclusion second, introduction last. It always works better that way. We have done 3 paragraphs on elephants, haven't we? Infrasound, species, and then one of your choice for the Unit 6 practicum. So really, you could go ahead, and for the Unit 8 practicum, you'll do that on your own later, you would have those 3 topics, and then you would simply have to kind of polish them up, figure out which order to put them in, create a conclusion and an introduction, and voila, you'd have it. This is a great way to introduce Unit 8 to students, is save 3 related topics, 3 topics on one subject, that you did in Unit 4 and or Unit 6, and pull those out and have them ready so that you can get about the business of then helping them learn to write conclusions and introductions to go with those things. So that's the basic model. I've already explained to you why some people dislike it and why I think it's a valid thing to learn or to have learned. Certainly, we would want students to understand it probably well enough that they could explain it to someone else. And one of the fun assignments that I've seen teachers give is, please write an essay on how to write an essay. And I've seen a very good job of this, of students, identifying 3 topics that you can think about when writing an essay. Invention, structure, style, process, right? So in the notes there's basically a summary of what I said, along with the adjusting for grade level section, answers to commonly asked questions. But what I'd like to do is draw your attention to page 130, because on this page we see how to start to create variations on the 5-paragraph model. So if a student takes a class and discovers the teacher is allergic to or dislikes those 5-paragraph essays for some reason, here are some ways to vary it or to lengthen it, usually is what you would need. There's also ways to shorten it as well. But we have the basic essay with 5, and if we wanted to, we could simply expand by 1 or 2 topics the body. So you have the introduction, that's the same, then 4 or possibly even 5 topic-based paragraphs. And then you could tell 4 or 5 things about Champlain, or 4 or 5 things about elephants, or 4 or 5 reasons why genetically modified salmon is a good or bad idea, right? And then your 6th or 7th would be the conclusion, and everything else is pretty much the same. You're just expanding the essay by 1 topic, and that gives you some freedom to increase a little bit. Also, I should probably tell you this. I've recommended, and I think you heard me, I've recommended that you give your students assignments in number of paragraphs. But you might be in a situation where you're coaching a student who has to do an assignment, or maybe an essay contest, or a different teacher who wants a certain number of words or pages, right? So here's a little thing that I have developed to help kids translate number of words or pages into number of paragraphs. And you have to do a little math here, but it's very, very helpful. The first thing is, if someone says write a certain number of pages, okay, write a 3-page paper. Okay? What you need to do is translate that into number of words. Now, to do that, what do you have to know? What is the average number of words per page? Right? So, average number of words per page. Now, that is going to be most significantly affected by the formatting, right? Font size, margin width, spacing, font type, right? And so what you would do is say, okay, what is the formatting I need? Just grab a bunch of random text, paste it onto that page, format it properly, and look at the bottom of the first page and see how many words are there, right? And so if it's Times Roman 12-point Microsoft Word default margins double space, right, there's going to be a certain number of words that's pretty consistent, right? Because some words long, some words short, but it's going to average out. So this is based on the formatting, so you figure that out. Now, once you know how many words it would be, then the next step is to figure out how many paragraphs, the number of paragraphs. Now, what do you need to know to figure that one? How many words in a paragraph? Now, that isn't formatting. That is personal average, right? what's your personal average? So I encourage the high school students to kind of track this. What is your personal average? Because you do develop what you're comfortable with. I, for example, if I look at all the stuff I've written for, I don't know, the past decade or so, I think I am at 140 words plus or minus 15% about 80% of the time. I really do not like paragraphs longer than 160, 70 words. And I definitely don't like paragraphs shorter than about 100. So that's my comfort range. And I always tell the kids, I say, it's your personal average. It's almost like your personality. Right? Are you a, here's the facts, this is all you need to know, let's get on with life kind of person? Or are you, but let's just tell more and let's tell as much as possible because everything is just so interesting kind of person? One is not better than the other. The world needs both, right? Short is not better than long. Long is not better than short. But it may be kind of your personality type. So track your average, and it may change as you grow. I always tell the students, as you get older and into adulthood, this may change. But if you know this, then you can figure out that. And then you can find or create a model because length dictates structure. Do you see? So if someone said, write a 3-page paper, I'd paste it in. I would discover that there's about 250 words per page. I would say 250 times 3 is 750. My personal average is 140. 750 divided by 140 is about 5 paragraphs. So for me, 5 paragraphs would be about right, maybe 6. I'm in the 5 to 6 range. But what if I had to write a 5-page paper, right? You think, okay, 5 pages, 250 words a page, 1,250 words, I average 100 per paragraph, I need 12 paragraphs. What do I do? So, this is where we have some ways to expand beyond the expanded essay. The first way is to expand the topics themselves. So, this is where you would take one or more of your topics and expand it into 2 paragraphs, almost like subtopics, right? So you'd actually kind of have a 2A and a 2B there. So for example, let us say you're writing a 7, you have a 7 but you need more. One of the topics is childhood. You're writing about a person. And so one of the topics is childhood. And you could divide that kind of into childhood family life, childhood education, right? So that would be still one topic, childhood. It would be enumerated in the introduction as simply childhood, but there would be an expanded topic to go with it. Does that make sense? You might have another topic, and you want to write about his presidency, and he had 2 terms, so you could divide that, into a 5A and a 5B. Oops, 5B, and you could talk about things that happened in his first term, things that happened in his second term, right? But it's still one topic, presidency. You see how that would work? So this is a case where you would enumerate the topics, but you would have some additional paragraphs to beef it up a little bit because you need more. Length dictates structure, right? So you need more, you structure it accordingly. So you can see that there as the expanded essay with expanded topics. The sample there in the text in the book on page 130 shows that maybe even you'd have 3 on one topic. You'd have 3 paragraphs, so you kind of have 3 subtopics under one heading, right? Now, once you get in the need for something really longer than that, let's say 1,500 words, you need 12, 14 paragraphs. How do you do that? It's going to get a little cumbersome. You certainly can't kind of have introduction, 12 topics, conclusion, subtopics starting to get a little too messy, you don't know where you are. So the next organizational step would be the super essay. And the super essay is essentially a great model because you have a super introduction, one entire 5 to 7 or more paragraph essay. So one of these right there, and then another one. Another 5 to 7 paragraph essay right there. And then you have a super conclusion. So this would be good for a range of 5, 10, 11, 12 on the low end, 14, 15, 16 on the higher end. And if you had a cause or need to, you could take one of those topics and expand it into 2 paragraphs, so you could even get a little bit more than 7 paragraphs per essay if you needed to. Do you see how that would work? Now, to do this, you will need to have an additional division in your thinking about the subject. So, your subject is the thing it's all about, and you have 3 topics. Here, the subject is the thing it's all about, but you have to divide it into 2 areas, right? Now, lots of things divide nicely. People divide nicely. Upper half, lower half. No. Early life, later life, right? Public life, private life. Great things they did, not so great things they did. Wars. Wars are ideal because they naturally divide in half, right? Good guys who won, bad guys who lost. Conditions in the north, conditions in the south. Weaponry at the beginning of the war, weaponry at the end of the war. Brilliant generals, idiot generals, right? Wars divide very nicely. Issues, if you get to the point where you're writing about issues, they also divide very nicely because they are issues, right? So, human cloning, right? You could divide that and talk about, the scientific medical potential, and then perhaps the ethical moral dangers. And then in the conclusion, you would probably argue that one outweighs the other. Do you see? So issues are great because they naturally kind of fall into two camps. And so the super essay works quite well for that. So that would get you up to, say, 12, 16, maybe 20 paragraphs. But what if, heaven forbid, you should need something longer than that? The 10-page final term paper. Well, 10-page, 2,500 words, need about 24 some paragraphs. Drop the class. No, don't drop the class and don't despair. Go to the super duper essay. And the super duper essay, I bet you can guess, is where you actually would add in a third entire 5 to 7 paragraph essay. You'd have the super duper introduction, 3 full 5 to 7 or more paragraph essays, and then the super duper conclusion. And this would get you into the range of 5, 10, 15, 16, 17 on the low end, 21, 22, 24 or more on the high end, right? 23, right? 21, 22, 23 or more on the high end. And that would get you into that range you need to be in, remember? Because length will give you the structure. Once you have the structure, you know how many topics you need to find and how many details to collect up about each of those topics. Don't you wish you knew this when you were in school some time ago? Wouldn't it have made things a bit easier? And let us say, heaven forbid, that you should have to write something even bigger than that. A 20-page paper. Drop the class. No, don't despair. You could take 2 of these and put those together and have the behemothic essay. Or 3 of those, right? the super behemothing essay. I don't know. I'm just kind of saying here that this is very powerful organizationally. And one reason I think it's very powerful is because in a way it mirrors the natural world. If you think about the way things are, from the smallest little atom to the greatest galaxy, everything is a structure within a structure within a structure, isn't it? You have, atomic within molecular, within elemental, within cellular, within organism, within ecosystem, within planetary, within solar, within galactic, right? And it goes on, perhaps infinitely, in both directions. So when we write and we attend to these things, sentence structure, inside paragraph structure, inside essay structure, inside, say, super essay, we are writing in such a way as to mirror the order of the universe. Do you see it? That's one reason I think it's so powerful and so appealing, is it operates within the structure of the way things really are. So, you can play with those models. You can actually, by the way, shorten it as well. In fact, for years I was coaching students to write the SAT essay, which was a 25-minute timed prompt-based argumentative essay. And of course the problem is in 25 minutes, you need a few minutes to think what are you going to write and a few minutes to proof at the end. And you have to write on paper, at least then. It's physically difficult to get 350, 400 words on paper in 20 minutes. And in 400 words, it's kind of hard to do a good job of 3 topics. So we used for many years what we euphemistically called the SAT 4-paragraph structure, where you actually just have 2 topics. So you have an introduction, you'd have 2 good examples, 2 reasons, 2 illustrations, 2 evidences, whatever you're trying to do, 2 good, strong examples, and then the 4th would be a conclusion. This would be a little shorter, and the body paragraphs would be a little longer, because more detail generally makes a better argument. And I would also coach the students to be a little bit careful, the danger of redundancy, right? So if you are going to use as your examples Jean Valjean from Les Miserables and the Life of Mother Teresa, it's a little dangerous to say, we see this clearly in the life of Jean Valjean, in the example of Jean Valjean in the life of Mother Teresa. And you have Jean Valjean, Mother Teresa, Mother Teresa. In conclusion, we see it was Jean Valjean and Mother Teresa. It's a little too much, right? So a good way to avoid the redundancy that is a danger in these essay models, instead of state the topics, hint or allude to the topics. Say, as we see from a character in a great novel, as well as the life of a modern-day saint. And then when you hit Jean Valjean, the person says, oh, that's that novel character I was looking forward to. Oh, Mother Teresa, that's that modern-day saint I was expecting. Do you see? So you hint or allude. And then in the same way, when you get down to the conclusion, you want to restate, tell what's important, give a little mini sermon perhaps, but don't restate too much, just echo. Just echo the topics. Very briefly, and that'll do the job. That'll give it the structure. And of course, if you need something shorter than that, well, you could go to just 2 paragraphs and have kind of an intro sentence, 2 topics, and an intro and a concluding sentence. And if you need something shorter than that, you just go to 1 paragraph, right? So 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 24. When you have that flexibility, then if your kids have learned some of these, and I'm not saying you should necessarily feel bad if you don't teach all of them to everybody, but if your students learn a few of these and how they can flex this way, Then when they go off, say to a college or university class and somebody says, write a paper, they'll intuitively know how length will give them a structure and how they can plan topics and details accordingly. Isn't that nice? Yeah, it's just lovely. Now, I would like to share with you something that was very, very, I think, enlightening to me when I kind of came upon it or figured it out or realized it. And that is that there's kind of stages at which we can move to help children become essayists, to write good, meaningful, purpose-driven essays. And there's a little, I'm going to draw it up here, but there's a little notes on this on page 126 in the margin. Because one of the questions that I was having to be asked again and again for years, and I really couldn't answer it very well, was, what is the difference between a report and an essay? In fact, I used to have fun with the teenagers. I'd get a class of teenagers and I'd ask them questions and kind of put them on the spot. It's fun to torture them that way. But I would kind of pull a Jay Leno. You remember when Jay Leno went out and did that jaywalking, and he would go out on the street and ask people random questions like, who is the Vice President of the United States? Right? And you get the craziest answers like, Bill Gates? You know. Of course, I don't know. Maybe someday he might be the Vice President. But he would kind of expose people's ignorance for your entertainment, and you would kind of wonder, is this real or contrived? And you fear the former and hope the latter. So I would do this to high school kids and say, what is an essay? And see what they say. And you would get interesting answers like, something you don't want to do. That was a common one. Or another common one is a really long report. Some people, with perfect honesty, would say, I have no idea. And then occasionally you would get a student who would say, well, it's kind of like this thing that you write that has this introduction and a body and a conclusion. And that's how they would define it, which was, better than nothing. But after doing this for years, I kind of thought, how would I answer that question? See, I know all the models. I can explain that. But what is the nature of the thing? What is an essay? So I looked it up. I started with the dictionary. And the definition I found said something like this. Essay is a short written composition generally expressing the ideas, belief, or opinion of the writer. Oh, so by definition, an essay must have an opinion. Now, as I said, we know that an opinion without some facts to support it, well, that's just irritating. That's obnoxious. So you have to have facts. But the purpose is to have an opinion, right? So I had a very easy time in school with writing as long as I was writing reports, because I was very able to collect up facts, change a few words, turn it in, and get a good grade. And then I did that 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. I went to high school. I don't remember, honestly, much about high school writing, learning, anything at all. I just remember the Latin teacher because she was cute. And selling yearbook ads because that seemed meaningful. And typing because it became useful. But other than that, pretty fuzzy. Anyway, then I went to college. And I took my first real class. Comparative World Religions. Humanities 104 at San Francisco State University. And I wrote my first paper, and I turned it in, and I got a C. With very little explanation. Just C. I was outraged. I never got a C on anything ever before. And I was confused, because I thought I had done a pretty good job. Because I got a whole pile of books, and copied a whole mess of facts, and changed a whole bunch of words. So I went to the professor's office. the professor's office. And I said, "Sir, I'm not quite sure why I got a C on this paper, because I thought I did a decent job and I tried. So could you tell me why it didn't get a better grade?" And he said, "Well, what you told me in this paper, I either knew already or could have found out very easily. What I wanted in this paper was what you think about these things." I walked out of his office into the San Francisco fog, thinking, I don't think about these things. Not only do I not think about them, I don't sure I have any intention to think about them. It was jolting. It was jarring, to say the least. But since then, I've really come to understand that where, for me, there was kind of a huge gap, a huge chasm, schism too, I guess. There is a pathway. There is a way to help students move from giving facts to having an opinion. And the trick of it is right here in the conclusion to the essay, most significant thing and why. That forces the opinion. That forces the student to make a statement of what they think about something. A small one at first, but it kind of forces it, right? So, student writes a little report on tree frogs, gives you lots of facts on tree frogs, gets to the conclusion, okay, now of all that you told me about tree frogs, what's the most important thing? I don't know. Choose something. I don't know. Pick something. I don't know. Pick anything. Camouflage. All right. The most important thing about tree frogs is camouflage. Why? The most important thing about tree frogs is camouflage because if tree frogs didn't have camouflage, birds would see them and find them and eat them, and the tree frog population would rapidly decrease. Therefore, camouflage is key to tree frog survival. Now, that was an opinion. Fact is, everything is key to tree frog survival. Diet, habitat, reproduction, right? But you're kind of just forcing this. Choose something and explain why you think that's the most significant thing. That's an opinion. So, what we start with is as soon as you force that into the conclusion, you're now getting a little tiny bit of essay. You've crossed the line from report to essay. And in the beginning, it may be, 95% report, facts, 5% essay or opinion, right? But it is now in the zone, and we gradually move the student towards essays that are specific to and purposed at an opinion. So let me show you how I kind of discovered this. It was really very pleasant. I noticed that it kind of parallels what we naturally do. Young children, we often let them write about animals. Children love animals. Information about animals is readily available. It comes in all different flavors and reading levels, and there's pictures, and most of it is really not very disputable. It's very easy to collect up facts about animals. A little bit hard to have an opinion, but you force it in, right? The most significant thing. States. We often have students in the upper elementary write about states. Countries are a little bit more interesting than states because states are kind of parallel. They all have very similar things. Countries are a little messier, a little more diverse. But you can kind of see that's what we would tend to do, say, in the upper elementary, teaching children to organize facts and present them. And if we can have them write a conclusion, what's the most significant thing about California, right? Or what's the most interesting thing about Japan, right? So we kind of force them to say that. Now, in this phase, really, you want the topics to be related, right? You want them to be related in some way. So if you're talking about elephants, you'd like to see if you could pick 3 topics that are related in some way, and that would make more sense. If you're talking about states, don't talk about the beautiful beaches and the traffic and pollution and the crazy governors, right? Try and talk about the beautiful beaches, the lovely mountains, and the stunning deserts, right? Or the traffic and pollution and the industry and the regulation. Or if you're going to talk about the crazy governors, talk also about the crazy congressmen and the uneducated voters, right? Try to get your connected. I think we do a bit of a disservice when we say, write a report about the state and try and tell everything there is to tell about it. It takes a long time. You're never going to tell everything there is to tell about it. And it might be better to do more frequent, shorter essays and get those related, right? If you're going to write about Japan, right, don't write about the fishing industry, the Tokugawa shogunate, and the Nagano Olympics. Too diverse. Write about the fishing industry, rice, agriculturally, and seaweed as a food that's popular in Japan. And then in your conclusion, you could put those things together and say the most significant thing about Japan is sushi. Because it blends together. The fishing industry, rice as a food, rice as agriculture, and seaweed as a food. And furthermore, sushi is what reminds us that Japan is still there, because everything else is made in China. Sorry. But you get my point. You get my point. You want to try and help the students choose related topics, take one thing, have an opinion. Now that's in that stage 1, and we generally think about that in, say, the elementary grades. Now, when you move into the next stage, things get a little trickier. And this would be things, events, and people. Things, events, and people. They're not nearly as neat and clean with topics that are organized and readily available and presented. They don't run in parallel. And things could be anything from, the Statue of Liberty to the Apollo space program. So you're going to have to read a bit before you can even start thinking about the topics you might have. Events very often are wars or discoveries, things like that. People, some people are kind of bulletproof, right? Florence Nightingale, bulletproof. There's really only one possible opinion you can have about Florence Nightingale, and that is that she's a really great lady who did really great things, and we're really glad she lived because she permanently ennobled the profession of nursing, right? Other people are less bulletproof, right? They're more controversial. Take, for example, Margaret Sanger, right? People have strong opinions, both positive and negative, about Margaret Sanger. Martin Luther. If you want a really interesting exercise, read a book about Martin Luther written by a Protestant, and then read a book about Martin Luther written by a Catholic. And what you discover is that some of the things are left out of the other book, right? And sometimes people who you thought were bulletproof maybe aren't. There's one guy who has researched Lincoln and written a book called The Real Lincoln and Lincoln Disclosed. He's come up with all sorts of things about Lincoln, what he said and thought, that are not included kind of in the normal library book, textbook portrayal. So it's an interesting thing to study things, events, and people which have a little bit of historical controversy. Because then, when you write about them, you can actually use a bit of strategy. You can choose topics which are selected. Topics which are selected to reinforce an opinion. For example, if you're writing about Bill Clinton and you want to portray him in a certain light, say as an excellent president who brought the economy in, brought peace to Bosnia-Herzegovina without embroiling us in a war, was generally one of the nicest guys ever to be in the White House. If you want to portray him that way, then probably there's a few topics from his presidency you might just not mention, right? He would select. Of course, if you want to portray him as a low-life, philandering scoundrel who permanently disennobled the presidency, well, then there's certain topics you would definitely want to put in. So, now you might be thinking, wait a minute. This sounds sneaky. You're going to choose some topics and ignore others to create an opinion? Why would we want to teach our children to be sneaky? Well, I'll point out a couple things. Number one, you don't have to teach children to be sneaky. They have a natural inclination towards it. And number two, and more importantly, if you show them how to do this, how to select some topics or facts and ignore other topics or facts, what will they learn? To recognize it. They will realize that other people could be doing that to them. And maybe, all things considered, is more like a few things lightly glossed over. You never know. Someone listens to NPR. All right. So, that's an interesting area to be. You could have a little bit of controversy, maybe a little bit less, depending on the person or the event. But that fits so well with that middle schooler and that kind of logic-y stage where they're starting to see how you can control things. Now, the next category is the one I think kills a lot of us, and that is literature. Generally the domain of the high school teachers, right? Combine English and composition, you have to read books, and then you have to write about the books you read. And I do fear that this kind of, in some cases, can kill the puppy for kids. They can be forced to analyze a book to the point where they don't even like it anymore, rather than just experiencing it, enjoying it. This is generally the time, sometimes up here, but usually at this point, when this idea of a thesis statement is strongly emphasized. This is where that comes into play on the essay. And so, this case, you would select topics to support your thesis. Okay? So you're going to read something, and then you're going to have to come up with a thesis for the paper. Something that you want to prove in your paper. Now, it used to be tough, because in the days before the internet, you would have to sit there and think, okay, Hamlet. What could I possibly say about Hamlet? What kind of thesis could I come up with? Now, it's so easy. You just Google up thesis statements for papers about Hamlet. And you'll get a couple dozen for sure to choose from. You'll also be invited to just buy the paper and not have to write it, which you could do too, but we're not going to go there. So you come up with something, right? And you say in your introduction your thesis. And you decide you want to go into the idea that Hamlet's behavior was responsible for Ophelia's death, right? So you start to find some examples to support this idea. You quote Shakespeare, or if you're really good, you quote people writing about Shakespeare, right? And you support with evidence the thesis that Hamlet's behavior was responsible for Ophelia's death, and in conclusion you say, clearly, all of this evidence proves, yes indeed, Hamlet was responsible. Or maybe you argue the opposite way. A good thesis could be done either way. Hamlet was not responsible for Ophelia's death. She was going off the deep end all by herself. His behavior was completely independent. And then you go quote Shakespeare ad nauseum, or quote people writing about Shakespeare, and you come to the conclusion that yes, you have now proven this thesis. That methodology starts to fail a little bit when you move into the last and closest, purest form of essay, which would be issues. Issues are issues because people disagree, right? The reason it's an issue is because there are different opinions on what should be done or what could be done, right? So if everybody agreed, it would be done. The reason it's not is because it's still being argued and discussed. And this is where you really have to be careful about a thesis statement in the beginning of the paper. You need to be a little more strategic. Because if my thesis, for example, is that the driving age everywhere in the United States should be raised to the age of 18, right? And I say that right there. Who's going to read my paper? People who agree with me. Who's going to throw it in the garbage and say, what an idiot? Those who I might like to persuade. I lose my audience, right? I would lose my audience if I give away the position too soon. And so that is why, with the last phase, we use a persuasive essay model, and the topics are chosen to be strategic. Strategic topics, right? Now, I won't attempt to argue the driving age should be raised, but there is a timeless example of a debate that rages and intimately affects the well-being of teenagers. Gum chewing in school. And I doubt that it's going to disappear. So, it's a little cliche, but it'll illustrate our point very nicely. If I want to argue that gum chewing should be allowed in our school, right? And I say that right up there, I'm going to lose the people I'm trying to persuade. To persuade people, you've got to get them to listen to you. So, there's a strategy here with the persuasive essay where you kind of suck people in to reading what you're saying by giving the appearance of being open-minded. So, I might take, for example, a topic that does not necessarily support the conclusion, or not obviously support the conclusion I want to have. Something that's a little bit con, right? Certainly with gum chewing, it's probably the janitorial menace, right? It's environmental distress, gum all over the place, under the tables, on the floors, costs money, generally a negative, right? However, you like to put in a little sliver of doubt, right? A little sliver of doubt. Well, but is this added cost really going to outweigh some of the potential benefits? Oh, now you've confused your reader, right? Because they're reading and they're thinking, oh, this guy agrees with me. Really? Maybe, maybe not. He doesn't agree with me, but maybe he does. What is the reader forced to do? Read on, right? Because the reader is curious. Does this author hold my opinion? Right? Is he smart like me? Or stupid like everybody else? I hate to say it, but that is our nature, is it not? We by nature are looking for agreement with our ideas. So persuasive people will create some common ground there, right? Okay, now the next one, you might choose a topic that's kind of half and half, right? Maybe a little bit of con and maybe a little bit of pro. Attentiveness, right? Distraction and attentiveness. Gum chewing could be distracting because people who don't chew gum could be irritated and distracted by people who do chew gum. But on the other hand, research shows, and we pull out some facts to support this, that some people improve their attentiveness when they're chewing gum, and that makes them better able to learn. So it's kind of a toss-up, isn't it? Right? Okay, now how's the reader feeling? Pretty confused, right? Well, where's this guy going? I mean, does it agree or not agree? Then you hit them with the big guns reason. Your big reason: dental health. Voluminous research shows that gum chewing improves dental health. Saliva helps to have an antiseptic effect against cavities. Sugarless gum is pretty much the norm, and if more students would chew gum, then fewer students would have to go to the dentist. There would be less lost days of school, and less headaches, and more money, because it wouldn't cost as much. And you could drive that thing as far as you want, right? Okay. Now, I don't necessarily believe anything I've said. I just am using something that's kind of an innocuous example. But you kind of almost get that feeling like, okay, instead of a thesis, what are you doing? You're asking the question, should gum chewing be allowed in our school? And then strategically, you are introducing facts and ideas that lead the reader to the conclusion you want them to have. Now, in the conclusion, one of the things you do is restate the topics, but in the persuasive essay model, you don't just restate the topics, you do it by arguing. You argue the topics. Now, if you have forgotten how to argue, I suggest you just hang out with a 13-year-old girl for a short period of time, because they know how to do this. And this is how they do it. They say, now, Mom, what you said is not quite true because of this, this, and this. And what I said actually is the case because of this, this, and this. And therefore, using impeccable logic, you should let me go to the mall with my friends tomorrow. Right? So they will try to lead you to the conclusion by discredit the con, and that's what you're doing here. You discredit the con, and you reaffirm the pro. So in the conclusion, you basically say, well, what I said up here about janitorial problems really isn't significant. And what I did say down here about dental health is going to make a huge difference. Right? So you restate the topics, argue, and reaffirm the pro. That's the persuasive model. That's the persuasive essay model as it was taught to me by Dr. Webster. And it may not work in an academic setting, because in an academic setting, they want more of a thesis. They want you to say how you're going to argue, and then they will judge how well you supported the argument. But in the real world, persuasive rhetoric often does this. You'll start reading an article, not quite sure where it's going. And once you read a certain ways in, guess what? You're hooked. Did you ever notice that? If you read something about halfway, you'll read to the end. Whether you really like it or not, you'll keep reading. And so this is a very, very effective one. And so you see then that wherever a student is, you see the pathway. The pathway towards developing the essayist, you take the next step. Now we're going to talk quite a bit more in the next unit about writing from literature, because it is an academic need that most students have. Many teachers have various ways to teach literature, literary analysis, and all that. So we'll expand on this before we finish the whole course. But if you have the picture of where you're going, I think it all makes sense. And you know, Dr. Webster, after he retired in Vancouver, he taught for a while. He tutored some wealthy Chinese students who were trying to get into the better universities in Vancouver, in British Columbia. And these were very intelligent kids whose English was their second language, and he was teaching them structure and style and writing, right? And we're talking, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. You know what he would do? He would always start them with a country essay, because the facts are easy to get, the topics can be organized and presented, he can teach the structure and style, there's nothing too tricky, right? Then he would move to a person, and he would have them write about a person as a second essay, because, again, pretty easy to organize. But they would master that model and those techniques. Then he would move into historical analysis or current issue analysis. You see? So even at the higher level, even if you're teaching 12th grade, there could be benefit in doing a more basic essay just to teach structure, style, process before you get into something that the information gets technical and confusing and difficult, right? So we have several examples. I'd like to read one with you just because it is so charming. Turn to page 131. And this is a grade 5 student from Canada who went to a school that used the structure and style program every grade level. So she has done this for 2 or 3 years, grade 5, and this particular essay has all the elements that we've talked about, and so I think you will recognize it, and it's short and it's sweet and cute. So, captivating, convincing, comical cartoons by Caroline. It's nice. Her name just fit right in with the alliteration there. Have you ever laughed, giggled, or chuckled at a cartoon? What's that? Her attempt at the attention getter? If so, you may have just read some of the world's most celebrated cartoons. Cartoons have a great variety of uses. That's topic 1, see it bolded. Throughout the enormous earth exist humorous cartoonists. That's the second topic. Undeniably, there are many cartoonists, but Charles Schulz stands out. And there's the third, right? Cartoons, which are used universally, have numerous purposes. Many cartoon characters make funny but wise statements. Essentially, most cartoons are developed for entertainment. Although cartoons are published mainly for amusement, some, such as political cartoons, send serious statements. Cartoons make you think. They enlighten you. They challenge. What technique is that? The 3 SSS, the short staccato sentences, right? In some countries, comics have negative uses, such as propaganda. Positively, cartoons may be used to spread good news. Communicating ideas is key use of cartoons. Now, I just want to point out, it says 4 sick. Do you see that? Sick means as the student did it, as it was originally done. And she marked it at 4 because of communicating. Looks like an ing opener. You know, though, it's a what? It's a gerund. It's an imposter. It should be a 1. But grade 5, who's going to stumble over that, right? Across the enormous earth exist only a few cartoonists who remain renowned. Possibly Charles Schulz is the most famous cartoonist in recent years. Now that sentence is perhaps misplaced, would go better at the end of the paragraph. Why? The next paragraph is all about him, but Johnny Hart makes simple but profound statements about life with his comic strip, BC. Although weird and bizarre, Gary Larson conveys intelligent messages in his highly acclaimed The Far Side. Turning everyday life into comedy is what Lynn Johnson's For Better or For Worse excels at, while Bill Keene's Family Circus is superior at capturing the innocence of children. Who is better at revealing selfishness, sarcasm, and cynicism as Jim Davis Garfield? Although few comical artists have succeeded, they have widely impacted our thinking. Now, where is this student, who's probably about 10 or 11 years old, getting her information? Look at the bottom. World Book Encyclopedia. See, it's not her opinion that Jim Davis Garfield reveals selfishness, cynicism, and sarcasm. 10-year-olds probably aren't going to think that way. That's the World Book saying this is what Jim Garfield did, right? But that's okay. She's reporting the fact. Focusing on Charles Schulz, who is an amazing cartoonist, helps people comprehend the usefulness of cartoons. Charles Schulz based the main character, Charlie Brown, on himself. Unsurprisingly, Schulz did poorly academically because he skipped 2 grades. That doesn't make any sense to me. Although he was barely recognized when he first started his drawing career, he continued. After many years of devoted work, Peanuts became extremely popular. How persistent. Now, technically, that's not a very short sentence because there's no verb. It's an interjection or exclamation. Peanuts is an exceptional example of a cartoon which is funny and wise in different ways. Charles Schulz is a superb picture of a cartoonist who succeeded. Cartoons have multiple uses, representing numerous devoted humorists, with the illustrious Charles Schulz in the lead. Okay, so she reiterated the 3 topics. And we have the kids do that, put in bold or highlight the topics that they're introducing in the introduction and the topics that they have discussed in the conclusion. And so you see that marked out. To many young readers, merriment is the most enjoyable aspect of cartoons. That's her statement right there. The most merriment. Cartoons can be convincing. They're comical. Cartoons captivate. Pretty good, wouldn't you say? I mean, if you've got a 10, 11-year-old student who can write that, you'd be happy, wouldn't you? Yeah. And again, don't feel a sense of despair. Oh, my student could never do that. Again, this is 2 to 3 or more years of practicing the structure and style system. So that essay would fall right into this category. Not really much of an opinion, not anything really controversial, but a little trickier than some of those easier things. We have got a lot of samples in here. I don't have time to read them. I would love to. If you're enamored with the idea of a super essay, check page 133, and you will actually see a 3-essay super essay, or what I kind of humorously called the super duper essay. And this shows Thomas Jefferson. You divide Jefferson into 3 areas. He was a statesman, he was a president, and he was an inventor, right? And you write a whole essay about Jefferson the statesman, another whole essay about Jefferson the president, and another whole essay about Jefferson the inventor, which means you need 3 or more topics for each of those. So you see the topics. As a statesman, he wrote the Declaration of Independence, he helped secure aid from France during the American War for Independence, and he served as vice president under John Adams, although they disagreed on so many things. Then in the conclusion, you would restate those topics and amplify one of them and say the most significant thing he did was help prove that playing a musical instrument helps you overcome writer's block, because he was kind of stuck writing the Declaration of Independence, and he got his violin, and he played a bit, and out came the wonderful when in the course of human events. Now, Jefferson as a president, that's a whole different essay. So what are some things he did? Well, he did the Louisiana Purchase. People thought he was crazy, but it was the best real estate deal in all of history. He sent out Lewis and Clark, which was really helpful because it gave so many street names to places in Washington and Idaho. And he failed, unfortunately, to defeat Alexander Hamilton's central banking scheme. And then if you look at the most important thing that happened in his presidency, indeed, was his failure to defeat the central banking scheme, because that later gave birth to the Federal Reserve, central banking, the inflation currency, and the future economic collapse of the world. Next essay, Jefferson the inventor. What are some things he did or did not invent? Well, people believe he invented the four-sided music stand, and he could describe that in stunning detail. He also had this amazing letter duplicating machine, so he could copy every letter that he wrote. It would write what he was writing, and he could keep a copy of his correspondence. Pretty clever, eh? And a lot of people think he invented the dumbwaiter, which is the precursor of the elevator, but not so. Almost all these things he simply stole from France and brought them over and introduced them to the colonies and the states. So I'm being a little funny just to keep you awake, but that's the schematic, do you see? So you could easily just take this thing, this diagram, reproduce it, and say, okay guys, this is how we're going to write a 17-paragraph composition. 3 divisions, 3 topics in each division, plan it out, and once you've got the schematic, guess what? You don't have one great huge long thing, you just have 17 short little things, right? And so even a great huge long thing is a combination. There is an example of a very, very well done persuasive essay on the next page. It's super essay. And I think it has a persuasive element to it as well on pesticides and the history of pesticides, and a very extensive bibliography at the end. And I should just kind of finish this up by mentioning the documentation idea. right? Because this is what kids come up against, and it's actually pretty nasty. My son-in-law graduated from Bible University with a degree in Bible and theology, and he told me, he said, it takes me as long to format the paper to the satisfaction of the style guide as it does to just write the paper in the first place. I mean, there seems to be something a bit wrong when that's the case, but it is a big deal in most of the high schools, the better high schools, the colleges, and the problem is it's not as though there's just one way to do it. There's MLA, there's APA, there's still, in some disciplines, Chicago or Turabian. There's MLA Social Sciences, MLA Pure Science. It's so crazy and confusing. So I'm not at all going to attempt to teach you how to do any of that. But I do want to make a couple observations. First observation is, I think the reason it's such a problem is because we tend to dump it on the students all at once. One day, you're a happy, carefree, innocent 13-year-old living your life and having a wonderful time. And the very next day, ka-wham! Full MLA format on the paper, citations, documentation, inline, all at once. It's too much. That's not our style. We don't like dumping things on people all at once. What's our style? Easy plus one thing at a time. So when you go about teaching your students documentation, try to break it into steps and phases, right? Phase 1, just put a bibliography at the bottom and say where you got your information. That's all you have to do, right? Step 2, make a quotation of some sort. Choose a quotation from one of your sources, put it in somewhere in that paper, and show them how to do it. The inline citation right now is more common than the footnote, right? So, Boone, comma, 231 or whatever. You teach them how to do that. And then you can add to that the idea of block quotations, where you're saying something that's more than 3 lines long, so rather than using quotation marks, use a colon, indent, and you have a block quotation. And then you can get to the idea of paraphrasing, and I like to go so far as to suggest that you can also show students how to do informational footnotes, or they can add a bit of information that would be off topic, but is interesting to the reader. You see? So make a little pathway for yourself. We do have some resources that make our life easier in this regard. There are websites like Purdue's Online Writing Lab that have the whole MLA format, accessible. You can go and, I have a periodical article written by 2 people. How do I format that? You can go find out. Also, there are some online databases that will do your formatting for you. EasyBib is one. MyBib, I think, is out there. There's probably going to be a few others. You just type in the ISBN number of the book, and boom, they'll send you the citation, just like that. Or you type in all the details, and they'll send you a document with it formatted, so you don't have to spend so much time poring over this type of thing. And it always changes, doesn't it? The MLA format for certain things changes every year. Right now, the biggest change is how you cite websites, which is probably the most common thing that you have to cite these days. So it's good to have the current MLA handbook or be a member and get access to the MLA website. But I would just say this, don't feel as though you have to send your kids off to college knowing everything about documentation and citation. If they just go off knowing something about how to do it, and then remind them, follow the style guide from the class, from the department, follow it slavishly, they'll be fine. They'll be fine. I am still partial myself towards the Turabian or the Chicago with the little tiny footnote, and then the end, or the little tiny number, and then the end note. Because I do not like seeing, Brown, comma, 241 in the middle of my sentence. It disturbs me. But who am I? I am a simple man. There's another great example here on page 142 of a compare-contrast essay by a high school level student. So again, we've tried to provide samples at all different levels, elementary, middle, high, so that you can get a sense of what some of our teachers and students have done and what you can hope to strive for yourself. So, page 144, 145, here's the instructions for your practicum. We're going to make it easy for you. This doesn't have to be a great, eloquent essay. You've already got 3 paragraphs on elephants done. You just kind of put in a conclusion, put in an introduction, put it all together in one piece, follow the checklist, be sure you've got everything in there you need, and send it on in if you like to. And you'll learn something from doing that as well. Okay, do we have any questions about anything pertaining to Unit 8 and essays? Yes, in the back there.
Okay, I'm totally on board with the topic and clincher, statement idea. I do it, I love it, it's logical. I still have this maybe tiny little black cloud still remaining, and that's the transitional sentence.
Excellent.
Is there a place for it anymore?
Yes.
And what's your philosophy on transitional sentences?
I am so glad you asked that question. Because, yes, and a lot of writing books and teachers will stress this idea of making a smooth transition from one topic to the next. First thing I'll say is I would rather have choppy but clearly on-topic paragraphs than a bunch of things that are mushed together with indentations and you don't know why. So I would err on the side of just sticking with the topic clincher and not worrying about it until you're really solid on that. But at some point, maybe second year or third year with your advanced students, you can teach the idea of a transitional clincher or a transitional topic sentence. This is, again, a technical way to implement that idea. Right? How can you know that you did it? Well, here would be a transitional clincher. This clincher, right here, will repeat or reflect what? 2 to 3 keywords of its topic. But a transitional clincher would do that and probably reflect or hint at 1 or 2 words of the next topic, right? So in this case, you might say, while the janitorial concerns regarding gum are still debatable, much more is known about the effect on attention, right? Now, many people consider gum chewing a distraction, clicking, popping sounds. However, other people claim that chewing gum helps them concentrate better, right? So you're going to maybe one word tell what's coming next. Do you see that? That's probably the most effective transition, but you can also do it kind of the other way. This topic sentence, right, is going to have 2 or 3 words that connect with this clincher, right? But this could also have 1 or 2 words that it pulls from the previous clincher. Now, obviously, the danger in this is being redundant and having word repeat. The only way to avoid the word repeat is to have a thesaurus and use it. Because when you're repeating the word too close to each other, it's not going to sound good. But it does make kind of a technical way to teach that idea of transitions between paragraphs. Do you like that idea? Don't bother with it first year. Wait until your students are solid and you can refine the thing. It's so easy for us, and particularly easy for those of us that have been doing this for a long time, to just dump everything on people all at once and think that they're just going to get it, forgetting what it was like to not know, forgetting that more gradual, would have been easier or better. So always keep that in mind. I know I went to a school once, and I was very impressed with the school. A lot of progressive, innovative ideas there. And one of the things that the school did was it paid for each teacher to take a college or university class, one semester class, each year in something they had never studied before. That was one of the qualifications to work at this school, because the administration wanted every teacher to constantly be reminded, what is it like to learn something completely new? A language or a musical instrument or an art or a subject, right? Such a good thing to keep in mind, that freshness. Any more question about Unit 8 or anything we've talked about? Thelma, you are loaded with good questions.
Okay, I'm just a little fuzzy on the topic, the three topics in the intro and the thesis statement. Do they still, do you use those together?
Yes. The thesis statement is the statement that you're going to try to prove, right? That is what you're going to try to prove. So if I want to try and prove that the Apollo space program was an investment of money that brought value beyond its cost, okay, that would give me focus, wouldn't it? Then I would be looking for topics that would support that thesis. Okay? So I would probably look at 3 scientific developments or medical developments or something that came out of the Apollo space program. Okay? If I wanted to prove that the United States was headed for a hyperinflation, that would be more kind of an issue, right? Then I would claim that. The United States is headed for a hyperinflation, and I would go look for historical or economic evidence, topics. So Zimbabwe might be a good one. Right? I don't know. I could also prove the United States is headed for a great deflation, and I'd choose different topics to choose that. Or I might say the United States is a strong, healthy economy that's going to persevere for the next 3 decades. And I would look for evidence to support that. You see? So that's where those come in. And I think some of the essay samples, if you read them, you'll detect, that's a thesis statement. And we'll get more into that with the literature. One more question. Okay, that'll be it, and then we'll take a break.
My question is from the binder on page 110.
Okay.
It says in grades, adjusting for grade level, grades 6 to 12. It says teach the triac model. I got the topic on the clincher. What is the RINA?
The triac, very astute of you to notice that. It's kind of an advanced idea, but it's a tremendously useful tool once you have the basics of structure and style. So I kind of don't think of it as something I want to tell you and you'll run off and try to teach it to everybody first thing. But again, second year, third year, working through, it would be applicable really in Unit 7 or 8 or perhaps some of the literary analysis stuff. It's a way to organize details. So we have kind of given a paragraph model which is very simplistic, right? So going back to Unit 4, Unit 7. Topic sentence. Certain number of details. Clincher. And we really haven't talked much about organizing details because there's such a diversity of things you might need to do, right, with those. In fact, I have a friend, Vit Pellegrino, who wrote a book, which you can buy from us if you like. It's called A Writer's Guide to Powerful Paragraphs. And in this book, Dr. Pellegrino identifies 30 different ways to organize details inside a paragraph. Things like specific to general, general to specific, chronological analysis, spatial analysis, compare, contrast, compare, and contrast. It goes on. 30 ways. And of course, you could buy this book. You could study all 30 of these models. You could practice writing multiple paragraphs of all these 30 models, and you could do that, and that would be kind of the equivalent of going to Home Depot, buying a very large and expensive toolbox, buying 30 very large and expensive tools and putting them in the toolbox and carrying around it with you wherever you go. Some people need to do that, right? I do not. I don't use tools. I really don't. I mean, if I cannot accomplish it with a Swiss Army knife and a hammer, I don't even try. It's not worth my time. I'm completely incompetent. But I do like that Swiss Army knife because there are little things I can do, like tighten a screw or open a bottle or cut my fingernails. Important things. So, the Triac is kind of like the Swiss Army knife, kind of like the Leatherman tool of paragraph models. It's very versatile. It'll do lots of organizing for you, but it won't solve every problem. But it's a good one to have. And the way it works is T stands for topic, R stands for restriction, or you narrow something ever so slightly. I stands for illustration, or maybe information, illustration. And A stands for analysis. What's the significance? What are the impacts? What's the value? What's the meaning? Right? And then C stands for clincher. So topic, restriction, information, analysis, clincher. And there's 5 parts. Now they're not 5 equal parts because the topic and restriction are probably very short. The illustration and analysis are the big parts, right? And then the clincher is going to be pretty short. So let's say I was writing a little composition about the Heinz family. And Betsy is the mom, right? And are you a homeschooling mom? Okay, so I would write one paragraph, that's all I have space for, about Betsy, right? So by the Triac model, it might go something like this. Betsy Heinz is an extremely devoted homeschool parent. Right? Now, that's a big subject, right? So we want to narrow it down, give it some direction, right? She is particularly enthusiastic about teaching her children science. Now we know where we're going with this. We see some direction. The restriction drives the content, you see? Now I need a few illustrations. She frequently can be found staying up until 1 or 2 in the morning, preparing fascinating kitchen science experiments, poring over the books that teach her how to do that. Furthermore, she has ordered a chemistry set and an electric set and a physics set for each one of her 7 children. She gets so excited about science that she makes a video of the experiments her children are doing, and they write marvelous reports to show their understanding of their lessons. Okay, this is all fiction, I know, but... Okay, now that's the illustration. Have I kind of proved my point? Okay, now we have an analysis, and we'll say something like, clearly, Betsy's children are learning well elements of the scientific method, falling in love with chemicals and electricity and what else can you follow? Pendulums. Trying to think of a physics thing there. Pendulums. And it is very likely that all of her hard work will gain one or more of her children a full scholarship to MIT in the future. Clearly we see Betsy is an extremely dedicated homeschool parent. Do you see? So I'm sorry for picking on you. You're okay with that. But the idea then would be, you could take any subject, any topic in the world, probably, and spin it out if you follow this pattern. Topic, restriction, narrow a little bit, give some information, illustration. It would say show, don't tell. So paint the picture. Analysis, what's the significance, value, impact, meaning, and clincher. So that's the Triac model. And again, I would not try to teach this to someone until you've been kind of working through all of our basic stuff for quite a while. And then you can refine it, much like that transitional clincher idea. Good. Okay, we're going to take a break and then come in for the home stretch, Unit 9, critiques, and the writing about literature. So stretch out, and we'll see you in a few minutes.